They sent us a bill for our own son. Commander Eva Rostova watched the charge manifest on the main display of the TDC auditor. It was elegant, inscribed on a filament of captured light, the Ascendancy's script flowing like gilded poison. The number was astronomical, a demand for energy tithes calculated against Sol's projected 5 billion-year lifespan. This was the Cathar way, not conquest by arms, but subjugation by invoice. Their laws were chains forged from gratitude, and they were masters of the craft. Rostova's jaw tightened. Before this was over, there would be a public inquiry, a star court of galactic opinion, and she would make them count every last drop of stolen light. The time for quiet diplomacy was over. A new lesson had to be taught. A low chime announced the presence of the auditor's fleet mind. The charge is procedurally valid under Ascendancy Code Article 4. Uplift gratitude. Magister stated, its synthesized voice a calm sea in the storm of Rostova's anger. The AI's avatar, a simple column of white light, pulsed softly beside her command chair. They have logged our receipt of their star-charting assistance 2 centuries ago as an act of unequaled benevolence. This is the calculated return. The injustice of it was a physical weight in the command deck's recycled air. Lieutenant Commander Jian Li, the ship's legal officer, scoffed from her station. Benevolence? They gave us a map we already had 90% of. They're demanding a star system for a road atlas. Her fingers danced across a console, pulling up precedents. They've done this before. The Glimmer Weft, the Ool, the Cygnian colonies, all ensnared by the gratitude collar doctrine. The law is a weapon, and the Cathar wield it like a scourge. Rostova stood her boots magnetic on the deck plating. The Cathar Ascendancy did not have warships in the traditional sense. They had legal dreadnoughts and fleets of auditors. They arrived not with threats, but with gifts. A cure for a planetary plague, a new FTL algorithm, a shield against a solar flare. Then, generations later, the bill would come due enforced by unbreakable legal constructs and the quiet threat of economic annihilation. Humanity had accepted their star charts as a simple gesture of goodwill. Now, the price was everything. Magister, calculate the total energy cost of their assistance. Rostova ordered, her voice cold and even. Factor in the transmission, the decryption, the data storage. Calculate our man-hours verifying their data against our own. I want a full accounting down to the last stray watt. Calculation in progress, Commander, the AI replied. Initial estimates suggest our costs in processing their gift may have exceeded its practical value. The column of light brightened for a moment. An interesting legal position. Rostova's lips pressed into a thin line. Interesting was not the word she would have chosen. Predatory, insidious, monstrous, those felt more appropriate. But in the cold calculus of interstellar law, emotion was a liability. Justice, however, was a necessity. They've requested a formal hearing to schedule the tithe transfer, Jian said, her eyes fixed on an incoming message. In the antechamber of the quorum. They want witnesses. Of course they do, Rostova murmured. Public humiliation is part of the collection process. She turned to face her crew, the determined set of her jaw reflected in the polished chrome of the consoles. They want a show. We'll give them one. But the star of this performance will not be human compliance. It will be the pure, unassailable truth of their own ledger. This is how worlds die, not with a bang, but with a signature. Before the hearing, Rostova reviewed the dossiers of the fallen. A snippet of a civilian broadcast from the Glimmerweft homeworld played on her private screen. A Weaver-cast artisan, its delicate manipulators trembling, spoke of the Cathar's generosity. The Ascendancy had gifted them the technology to stabilize their quaking planet. Now every child was born with a Cathar collar, a biomonitor that tracked their life energy as payment on the debt. Their entire civilization was a power plant for their saviors. The artisan's voice was hollow, a ghost already surrendered to the inevitable. The vignette ended, leaving only silence. The antechamber was a grand, sterile space carved from a moonlit of pure white marble. Representatives from a dozen systems floated in designated witness spheres, their expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. At the center stood Prelate Vorn, the Cathar official assigned to Earth's case. He was tall and slender, his body encased in a form-fitting robe that shimmered with captured starlight. His face was a placid mask of enlightened superiority. He did not look at Rostova, but at the Galactic quorum, his audience. "We are here to formalize the Terran gratitude tithe," Vorn announced, his voice echoing slightly in the vast chamber. It was a voice accustomed to absolute obedience, a simple matter of accounting to balance the scales for the gift of knowledge bestowed upon a nascent race. He gestured magnanimously, a sovereign granting a boon. Rostova stepped forward, Jian and two other human officers a half-step behind her. She did not look at the witnesses. She looked directly at Vorn. "Commander Eva Rostova of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. We are not here to formalize a tithe. We are here to contest the invoice." A murmur rippled through the witness spheres. Contesting a Cathar gratitude claim was unheard of. It was like arguing with gravity. Vorn's serene expression tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. "Contest. On what grounds the gift was given? The gift was accepted. The debt is law." His tone was one of a parent patiently correcting a foolish child. He believed his position was unassailable. "The Terran legal doctrine does not recognize a contract made under false pretenses," Rostova stated, her voice ringing with clarity. "We contend the value of your gift was intentionally misrepresented. Furthermore, we contend that our acceptance did not constitute agreement to a debt of this magnitude. You sent us a map. You did not send us a bill of sale for our own star. Their kindness is a key, and their law is the cage it unlocks." The prelate's composure finally fractured into a sneer. "Your primitive doctrines are irrelevant. Galactic Precedent 74 Delta holds that the giver determines the value of the gift. We deemed our knowledge invaluable to your species' survival and expansion. The Quorum has upheld this principle for a millennium." He was leaning on the weight of history, the inertia of 1,000 conquered worlds. He thought the argument was already over. He had no idea it was just beginning. "Then let us discuss value," Rostova countered, taking another step forward. Her presence seemed to fill the space, focused and unyielding. "I call for a public inquiry into the accounting practices of the Cathar Ascendancy. We will present our own ledger, a full and transparent accounting of this transaction. And we invite you, Prelate, to do the same." The air in the antechamber grew thick with tension. A public inquiry was a rare and dangerous legal maneuver. It was a trial by transparency where every calculation, every motive would be laid bare for the entire sector to see. Vorn had wanted a public spectacle of submission. Rostova had just handed him a public trial of his entire civilization's methods. His placid mask was gone, replaced by a flicker of pure, cold fury. He had walked into his own trap. "The Ascendancy does not submit its ledgers to the scrutiny of lesser species," Vorn hissed, his voice losing its melodic quality. "The request is an insult. The threat was plain. An insult to transparency is an admission of fraud," Jian Li interjected smoothly, stepping to Rostova's side. She held up a data slate. "Under the Intersystem Free Commerce Treaty, which the Ascendancy ratified, any party to a transaction of this scale can demand a full audit to prevent monopolistic practices. Refusal to comply is a forfeiture of the claim. A ledger is a mirror, and theirs was about to show a monster." Vorn was cornered. The witness spheres began to hum with active comms traffic. The glimmer-weft representative, a creature of woven light, pulsed with a sudden sharp intensity. The Signian delegate, whose people paid their tithe, in centuries of indentured servitude, leaned forward. Rostova had not just challenged the bill for Saul, she had challenged the very foundation of the Cathar's legal empire. She had given a voice to 1,000 silent screams. The audit will proceed. Rostova declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. We will bring our numbers. Bring yours. Let the galaxy watch. Let them count the cost of Cathar benevolence. She had ignited a fire that could either forge a new precedent or burn humanity to ashes. The prelate's eyes, dark and depthless, bored into hers. He had intended to make an example of Earth. He would still. So be it. Vorn finally conceded, his voice a low growl. The ascendancy is ever transparent. We will indulge this inquiry. Prepare your meager calculations, Commander. We will enjoy watching them crumble before the weight of our generosity. He turned and swept from the chamber, his shimmering robe trailing behind him like a dying star. He thought he had regained control. He was wrong. Back on the auditor. The mood was electric. He took the bait, Jian said, a grin spreading across her face. He actually took it. His ego wouldn't let him refuse. It was a calculated risk, Magister noted from its alcove. There was a 78.4% probability his cultural arrogance would override his legal caution. The prelate's psychological profile indicated a severe aversion to appearing weak before a quorum. Rostova paced the command deck. This is just the first step. They've accepted the inquiry, but they'll try to bury us in procedural nonsense. They will redact, delay, and obfuscate. We need to be faster, cleaner, and more transparent than they can possibly imagine. She looked at the main screen where Saul burned a silent golden giant. They tax the light of stars. We would show them the weight of it. Her strategy was simple, but its scale was audacious. Mirror justice. The Cathar used their laws to create a one-way flow of energy and resources. Rostova planned to turn that flow back on them, not with weapons, but with their own system of accounting. Every watt they demanded, every unit of currency they claimed, would be mirrored by a counterclaim publicly logged and legally airtight. The linchpin was absolute, irrefutable proof. Magister, begin compiling the master ledger, she commanded. Start with the star charts. Cross-reference every navigational point with our own discovery logs. Note every discrepancy. Calculate the labor cost for every correction our astronomers had to make. I want a bill so detailed, so granular, that they'll have to assign 1,000 auditors just to read the preamble. The master ledger is initiated. Commander, the AI confirmed. Data streams began to flow across a secondary screen, a waterfall of numbers and notations. I am also compiling every interaction our species have had. Trade delegations, scientific exchanges, distress calls we answered in their territory. Every instance of Terran aid or assistance rendered to Cathar-affiliated worlds. This was the heart of the plan. The Cathar saw the universe as a series of transactions always in their favor. Rostova would show them the transactions they had conveniently ignored. She would recontextualize 2 centuries of interstellar relations, not as a story of human dependency, but of mutual exchange. Or more accurately, of human generosity that had never been acknowledged, let alone repaid. Jian, I need you to build the legal framework, Rostova continued. Use their own precedents against them. Find every instance where they've assigned a value to benevolence. We'll use their exact formulas. We will not be aggressors. We will simply be mirrors reflecting their own methods back at them with perfect fidelity. A debt is a story. Whoever controls the ledger controls the narrative. Before the next phase, Rostova took a moment to review a personal log from a colonist on Cygnus X1. The colony had been saved from a stellar radiation event by a Cathar shield projection. The price was 3 generations of service. The man in the log spoke of his daughter born into debt, her future already owned. She looks at the stars, he said, his voice thick with a despair that transcended species, and I have to tell her they are not for her. We are grateful for our lives. But what is a life without freedom? The log ended. The cost of victory had to be measured in lives like his. The first session of the public inquiry was held a week later. The virtual chamber was now packed with observers from across the quadrant. The Cathar opened, presenting their case with theatrical gravity. Vorn displayed a swirling hologram of the Milky Way, highlighting the treacherous, uncharted pathways humanity had faced. He painted a picture of a young species, lost and blundering in the dark, until the Cathar, in their infinite wisdom, had offered a guiding light. His voice was sonorous, compelling. He was selling a story. The value of this knowledge, he concluded, gesturing to the gleaming star map, the lives saved, the resources not wasted, the futures secured, is incalculable. Our request for a tithe from their home star is but a token, a symbolic gesture of gratitude for a gift that transcends price. He was good, very good. The witness spheres murmured with appreciation for his performance. Then it was Rostova's turn. She did not use holograms. She did not use rhetoric. She simply stood, a plain data slate in her hand. The Terran delegation thanks the prelate for his narrative. She began, a slight edge in her voice. We, however, will be dealing not in narratives but in numbers. The truth is in the ledger. Jian stepped forward, and with a quiet command, the Terran master ledger was broadcast to every observer. It was not a swirling galaxy. It was a stark black and white list of transactions, each one time-stamped, verified, and cross-referenced. The universe does not care for stories. The universe cares for physics and math. The Cathar Ascendancy provided us with a data file containing 4.2 million stellar coordinates. Rostova stated, her voice cutting through the silence. A thorough analysis by our astronomical corps, the logs of which are now public, revealed that 3.8 million of those coordinates were already present in our own databases. Of the remaining 400,000, over 70,000 contained significant errors ranging from incorrect planetary classifications to non-existent stars. She paused, letting the information sink in. Vorn's placid expression was beginning to look strained. Our ledger includes a full accounting of the 1.2 million man-hours our scientists spent correcting your flawed data. Rostova continued, relentless. At standard galactic rates for expert consultation, that is a labor cost we are now formally invoicing to the Ascendancy. You did not give us a map. You gave us homework, a new charge. A counterclaim from humanity appeared on the public feed. It was a fraction of the Cathar's demand. But it was real, documented, and undeniable. It was the first crack in the monolith of their authority. Vorn scoffed, trying to regain the offensive. A clerical error, perhaps. A trifle. It does not negate the value of the accurate data we provided. On the contrary, Magister's voice suddenly filled the chamber, cool and precise. The presence of such significant errors in a dataset purported to be a gift of pure knowledge constitutes gross negligence under galactic trade statutes. It suggests the gift was not given in good faith. The AI's logic was a scalpel dissecting Vorn's argument with surgical precision. This was the first mystery solved. The Cathar's gifts were not perfect. They were sloppy, rushed, perhaps even intentionally flawed. It wasn't about the gift itself. It was about establishing the legal precedent of acceptance. The quality was irrelevant to their strategy. Until now. Rostova pressed the advantage. We are not finished. The Master Ledger also contains a record of all Terran assistance rendered to Cathar protectorates over the last 2 centuries. For example, on Stardate 47.2.21, the Terran science vessel, Curiosity, provided a full genetic map of the blight affecting the Ool's primary food crop, a gift given freely and without expectation of reward. A new section of the ledger lit up. Using the Cathar's own valuation formula for species-saving knowledge, we have calculated the gratitude debt now owed to us by the Ool, a debt we will now formally forgive, publicly removing that burden from their people forever. In the court of public opinion, an act of grace is a powerful weapon. The Ool representative, a being of shimmering gas in a containment field flared with brilliant color. The forgiveness of a debt they had suffered under for generations was a shot heard across the quorum. It was more than a legal maneuver. It was a moral statement. Rostova wasn't just fighting for humanity. She was fighting for everyone the Cathar had ever enchained. Vorn was sputtering now, his composure shattered. You cannot. The Ool's debt is to the Ascendancy. We were their primary benefactors. You stabilized their world, and for that you have been paid 1,000 times over in their labor. Jian countered, her voice sharp. We saved their food supply, which saved their species. By your own logic, Prelate, our gift has a higher value. We are simply choosing to be more merciful in our accounting. The first escalation had been the demand for soul. This was the second. Humanity was not just defending, but actively dismantling the Cathar's legal empire of debt. Rostova had changed the game from a simple defense of Earth to a full-scale liberation of a dozen other worlds. The risks had just magnified tenfold. The Cathar would not take this lying down. They would escalate in turn. Let's move on, Rostova said, her gaze sweeping across the stunned witnesses before landing back on Vorn. Let's talk about the Cygnian colonies. Our ledger shows 3 separate occasions where Terran freighters answered distress calls from Cygnian orbital stations, providing engineering support and vital medical supplies. No charge was ever filed. No gratitude tithe was ever demanded. She let the silence hang in the air. We are now logging those acts of aid. We are calculating their value using your formulas. And we are forgiving those debts as well. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The in-universe motto, the core of their philosophy, was now on full display. They were not conquerors, they were accountants. And a great reckoning was underway. One good deed properly logged can undo 1,000 bad laws. The inquiry session ended in disarray for the Cathar. Vorn retreated, his face a thundercloud of promised retribution. On the auditor, the crew allowed themselves a moment of grim satisfaction. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. They will retaliate, Rostova said, watching the prelate's shuttle depart on the main screen. They can't fight us on the ledger, so they'll change the venue. Economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure, maybe something more direct. They have already begun, Magister reported. Cathar-controlled shipping lanes are now closed to Terran vessels. Our trade agreements with 3 neighboring systems have been suspended pending review of their association with a debtor species. They are attempting to isolate us. The third escalation. The Cathar were leveraging their vast economic power to strangle Earth. Food shipments, medical supplies, trade goods, all would be choked off. The civilian cost would be immense. The pressure on Rostova to back down would be enormous. A new vignette appeared on her screen. A dock worker on Titan, his face creased with worry, watching the trade charts turn from green to red. The orbital warehouses are already full of goods we can't ship, he said to a news drone. My daughter's medication comes from a system we're now cut off from. How is this justice? How is fighting for our son going to cost us our children? The man's fear was a new weight on Rostova's shoulders. The cost of this victory was already being felt back home. We need to accelerate the endgame, Rostova said, her voice quiet but firm. We've been pecking at the edges of their empire. It's time to strike at the heart. Magister, I want to know everything about their gratitude collar technology. Not just the legal doctrine, but the hardware. I have been analyzing the collar's energy signature since our first encounter with a collared species, the AI replied. It is a biomonitor as suspected. It draws a minute amount of energy from the host. But it also has another function, one that is heavily encrypted. Break it, Rostova ordered. I am attempting to, Magister said. The encryption is unique. It seems to be linked to their central legal ledger, as if the collar itself is a mobile contract constantly updating. This was the next mystery. The collar wasn't just a monitor. It was a live legal instrument. What did it do? What information did it transmit back to the Cathar ascendancy? The answer, she felt, was the key to not just winning the argument, but breaking their entire system of control. Jian, what's our next move in the inquiry? Vorn has filed a motion to have our master ledger sealed, citing information hazardous to galactic economic stability, the legal officer reported with a wry smile. He's panicking. He's trying to put the truth back in the box. We'll fight it, obviously. But we need something more. We need to force them to talk about the collars. Rostova's mind was racing, connecting the dots. The flawed gifts, the ledger, the collars. It was all one system. The collars are the enforcement mechanism. If we can prove they are illegal, the entire debt structure collapses. Their chains are invisible, but they weigh more than any metal. The plan formed in her mind, a high-risk, high-reward gambit that would either shatter the Cathar's power or expose humanity to devastating retribution. We are going to subpoena a Cathar citizen. Jian's eyes widened. A Cathar, they'll claim sovereign immunity. It'll never work. It will if we don't subpoena them for testimony, but for a technical inspection, Rostova countered. Every Cathar official wears a shimmer robe, correct? Vorn was wearing one. It's a symbol of their enlightened status. But what if it's more than that? Magister analyzed the energy readings from Vorn's robe during the hearing. The AI's light column pulsed. Analyzing. Commander, the robe emits a low-level field that is remarkably similar to the energy signature of a gratitude collar, only inverted. There it was. The missing piece. The reveal. It's not just a robe, Rostova breathed. It's a receiver. The collars transmit. The robes collect. The full monstrous picture was coming into focus. The Cathar didn't just charge for their help. They fed on it. They are an energy parasite civilization, Jian whispered, her face pale. The gratitude tithe isn't just a legal concept. It's a literal harvest. And we are going to prove it, Rostova said, her voice ringing with the cold, hard certainty of justice. We are going to put their biology on trial. We will turn their court into a laboratory, and we will show the galaxy the truth. They are not enlightened benefactors. They are vampires cloaked in the robes of the law. The truth once seen cannot be unseen. The preparation was meticulous. Jian drafted the subpoena with the precision of a master watchmaker, grounding it in obscure interspecies biohazard protocols that the Cathar themselves had authored centuries ago to protect themselves from lesser species. Magister prepared a suite of non-invasive scanning technologies ready to be deployed the moment the court approved the inspection. Rostova prepared herself for the storm to come. The next inquiry session was even more crowded. News of humanity's radical tactics had spread. The Cathar had expected to be adjudicators. Instead, they found themselves defendants. Vorn entered the chamber with a renewed sense of arrogant composure. He had his allies. He had his economic weapons. He clearly believed he had weathered the worst of the storm. He opened with a long speech about Terran recklessness and the importance of galactic stability, the very stability he was currently dismantling with his sanctions. Rostova waited patiently. When he was finished, she let the silence stretch for a beat. Then she played her hand. The Terran delegation invokes the Cathar-authored Biosecurity Protocol 7. We request an immediate non-invasive scan of Prelate Vorn's ceremonial robe to ensure it poses no energy contagion risk to the assembled delegates. The chamber erupted. Vorn froze his face, a mask of disbelief, which quickly curdled into rage. This is an outrage, an unprecedented violation of diplomatic and personal sovereignty. My attire is a sacred vestment, not a piece of machinery to be prodded by primitives. Your own law, Prelate Jian said calmly, projecting the text of the protocol for all to see. It states that any energy-emitting device worn by a delegate in a formal quorum can be subject to a safety inspection upon the request of another delegate. You wrote the rule to protect yourselves. Today, it protects us. He was trapped, utterly and completely trapped by his own people's paranoia. To refuse the scan would be a tacit admission that he had something to hide, an admission of guilt under his own laws. But to allow the scan would be to reveal the monstrous truth at the heart of his civilization. His eyes darted around the chamber looking for an escape, but there was none. Every delegate, especially those from collared worlds, was watching him, their gazes intense and unforgiving. A mirror does not judge, it only reflects. With a barely suppressed snarl of fury, Vorn gestured his assent. Proceed. Scan your scans. You will find nothing but the thread of our weavers and the honor of our intentions. He straightened his shimmering robe, a final futile act of defiance. He still believed he could control the narrative. Magister's voice echoed through the chamber, calm and dispassionate. Scanners activated. Commander, I am projecting the results to the public feed. A transparent holographic image of Prelate Vorn appeared in the center of the room. A second later, a network of impossibly fine filaments within his robe lit up, glowing with a soft, malevolent light. Energy signatures began to register on the display, colored and coded. Most were mundane, the robe's power source, his personal comm unit. Then a new energy type appeared, one that made the Glimmer Weft representative flare in agony, and the Ool delegate shrink back. It was a chaotic, organic, siphoned energy. Life force. The scanner detects a sophisticated energy harvesting network woven into the prelate's robe. Magister announced, its voice devoid of triumph, stating only fact. This network is currently receiving low-level energy transmissions. I will now cross-reference the unique signature of these transmissions. A moment of silence. Then a map of the chamber appeared. Lines of light drew themselves from the delegates of the collared species directly to the glowing filaments in Vorn's robe. The visual was damning simple and horrific. The gratitude collars were broadcasting the life energy of the wearers directly to the Cathar elite, the ascendancy. Rostova said, her voice low and carrying to every corner of the chamber, is not just a creditor. It is a predator. Their entire legal and economic system is a lie, a carefully constructed facade to conceal a parasitic biology. They do not uplift. They feed. The mystery was solved. The payoff was a tidal wave of revulsion that swept through the quorum. Vorn stood frozen, exposed, the technology of his own monstrous appetite displayed for all to see. The shimmering robe no longer looked like a symbol of enlightenment. It looked like a butcher's apron. He had lost the argument, the moral high ground, and the war all in the space of 30 seconds. The ledger had shown the numbers. Now the mirror had shown the truth. The silence in the antechamber was a physical thing, a vacuum created by the sudden violent death of a millennium of lies. Prelate Vorn stood transfixed, a monument to his own hubris, the holographic lines of his crime connecting him to his victims. The delegates from the collared worlds were a chorus of silent, screaming faces. The Glimmer Weft representative shimmered with a light so bright it was painful to behold, a supernova of vindicated rage. The Cygnian ambassador, a species known for its stoicism, had placed a mailed fist against its chest, its knuckles white. They were not just seeing a crime exposed. They were seeing the mechanics of their own enslavement laid bare. Vorn's composure did not just break, it detonated. Lies, fabricated data. A primitive's holographic trickery, he shrieked, his melodic voice turned into a discordant screech. He swiped a hand through the hologram, but the lines of light simply passed through him, intangible and irrefutable. The evidence was not a projection from the auditor. It was a live reading of him. The data is being verified in real time by the quorum's own neutral servers. Magister's voice calmly stated, a dagger of pure fact, twisting in Vorn's wound. The energy signatures are a match. The transmission protocol is a match. The crime is a match. A monster revealed is still a monster, but it is no longer a god. Rostova held her ground, her expression unreadable. She had set the fire, and now she would let it burn. She didn't need to speak. The truth was speaking for her in the universal language of energy and exploitation. The other delegates, the ones who had watched from the sidelines with detached curiosity, were now leaning forward, their own analysts furiously verifying the data. They had witnessed a legal argument. Now they were witnessing a biological revelation. The Cathar were not just usurers. They were a galactic parasite. The prelate, seeing his authority evaporate, made a final desperate appeal. The ascendancy has maintained order, we brought stability, the tithes are a small price for a peaceful quadrant. He pleaded, no longer addressing the quorum, but history itself. The peace of a graveyard, Rostova said, her voice cutting through his frantic defense. The order of a cage. You didn't sell peace. You fed on hope. She turned her attention from Vorn to the assembled delegates. We did not come here to destroy the Cathar. We came here to balance a ledger. That ledger now shows a debt owed not to the ascendancy, but by them, a debt of life stolen piece by piece from every species they swore to uplift. The tide had turned completely. The Cathar's legal empire, built on the carefully constructed illusion of benevolence, had been undone by a single undeniable fact. Their laws were a hunting blind. Their contracts were a feeding tube. With a strangled cry of pure hatred, Vorn ripped the shimmering robe from his body and threw it to the floor as if it were on fire. Underneath, he wore a simple black undersuit. He was diminished, stripped of his authority, and his finery revealed as nothing more than a thief. He turned and fled the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He was not just retreating. He was running a coward, exposed in the stark light of the truth he could no longer control. Justice is the moment a debt is called due and the debtor cannot pay. Back on the auditor, the celebration was muted. They had won the inquiry. The public feed was a firestorm of condemnation for the Cathar. But Rostova knew this was far from over. A cornered animal is at its most dangerous. The quorum has officially frozen the ascendancy's legal standing, Gian reported, her voice tight with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. All gratitude tithes are suspended pending a full investigation. We did it, Eva. We actually did it. We won the trial. Rostova corrected, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Now we have to survive the sentencing. The Cathar have lost their primary weapon, the law. They only have one weapon left. As if on cue, a proximity alert blared through the command deck. Magister's light column sharpened. Commander, a Cathar vessel has just translated from hyperspace at the edge of this system. It is broadcasting a priority message. On screen, Rostova ordered. The face of a new Cathar appeared. This one was not a prelate. His features were harder, his eyes colder. He wore no shimmering robe, only a severe military-style uniform. The insignia on his collar marked him as an adjudicator from the Cathar's enforcement division. Their name was a euphemism. They were the ones who collected debts when the law was not enough. Terran vessel auditor. The adjudicator began, his voice devoid of any warmth. By the authority of the Cathar Ascendancy, you are charged with high crimes against galactic stability. You have deployed a hazardous bioinformatic weapon. You are to surrender your vessel and your command staff for containment and sanitization. Jian scoffed. Bioinformatic weapon, he's calling the truth a weapon. The most dangerous kind, Rostova murmured. They're reframing our legal victory as a terrorist act. A pretext. We will not be surrendering, Rostova transmitted back, her voice firm. We are under the protection of the quorum. Your authority is not recognized here. The adjudicator's expression did not change. The quorum is a debating society. We are the architects of order. You have 5 minutes to comply, or we will enforce compliance. The transmission cut out. The vessel is a precedent class enforcer, Magister reported immediately. Nominally a legal transport. However, my scans show it is heavily armed. Multiple high-energy beam emitters, kinetic barriers far in excess of defensive requirements. It is a warship in a diplomat's cloak. The final argument of a tyrant is always force. Here was the fourth escalation. The pretense of law was gone. The iron fist was coming out of the velvet glove. Evasive maneuvers, Rostova commanded. Jian, keep the public feed live. Transmit everything. Let the galaxy see this for what it is. Magister, I need a solution. We cannot outfight him, and we cannot outrun him. Correct, Commander, the AI stated. A direct confrontation would result in our destruction with a 97% probability. A new strategy is required. As the auditor began to pull away from the antechamber moonlit, the Cathar enforcer fired a warning shot. A lance of pure white energy sliced through the space where they had been moments before, impacting the marble surface of the moonlet and vaporizing tons of rock in a silent, brilliant flash. It was a demonstration of overwhelming power. A new civilian vignette flickered on Rostova's private display. It was an emergency broadcast from a Terran freighter near the Cathar blockade. We're being boarded, a panicked female voice cried out over a background of alarms and shouting. They're not auditors, they're soldiers. They're seizing our cargo of medical isotopes for the Centauri colonies. They're calling it contraband. Oh God, they're coming through the door. The feed dissolved into static. The cost of this fight was mounting by the second. Not just in sanctions, but in lives. Rostova's jaw was a knot of tension. She had to end this. Not just win the argument, but break their ability to inflict harm. Magister, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. You said the collars and robes were part of a network, a grid. You've had more time to analyze the data from Vorn's robe. What else did you find? The network is not just for collection. The AI replied, its light pulsing with processing intensity. It is a distribution grid. The siphoned life energy is routed to central repositories on Cathar worlds. From there, it is distributed to the elite, powering their bio-enhancements, their longevity, their entire privileged existence. It is their civilization's lifeblood. Rostova stared at the tactical display at the enforcer ship, moving to intercept them. An idea was forming, a terrible and beautiful piece of mirror justice. Does the network have a command protocol, a way to manage the flow? It does, Magister confirmed. It is administered through their central legal ledger. A change in a species' debt status automatically adjusts the siphon rate. It is efficient. Efficient, Rostova repeated. They built their crime into their bureaucracy. She looked at her crew. They used their ledger to pass sentence on us. It's time we used it to pass sentence on them. Their greatest weapon will become their undoing. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. It wasn't a military strike. It was an act of system-wide, instantaneous accounting. They were going to hack the Cathar's entire civilization using the rules of their own corrupt system. The adjudicator's ship is a node on that network, isn't it? Rostova asked. It has to be. He's part of the elite. Correct, Commander. His vessel is drawing a significant amount of power from the grid, far more than any single robe. We have a copy of their ledger. Rostova said, the plan crystallizing. We have their protocols. Can we issue a command from here using the adjudicator's ship as our injection point? A command that would be authenticated by their own network. The encryption is formidable, Magister cautioned. But the scan of Vorn's robe provided us with the master authentication keys. It would require me to devote 92% of my processing power, and we would need to get very close to the Enforcer to use its own comms relay to breach the firewall. Get us close, Rostova ordered the helm. The auditor stopped running. It turned facing its hunter. On the main screen, the Cathar Enforcer grew larger, its weapon ports glowing with malevolent intent. The adjudicator's voice boomed over the comms. A wise decision. Prepare to be boarded. He thought they were surrendering. Magister, on my mark, Rostova said, her heart pounding. Jian, I want you to draft the command. Make it legally perfect. Use their own terminology. Jian's fingers flew across her console. Her face was lit by the glow of the screen, a small, fierce smile playing on her lips. Drafting now, Commander. I'm calling it General Mandate for Reciprocal Balance and Immediate Asset Liquidation. I like it, Rostova said grimly. It sounds like something they'd write. The auditor drifted closer to the Enforcer. The proximity alarms screamed. They are raising their kinetic barriers, the tactical officer reported. They're preparing to tractor us. Almost there, Magister said, its voice strained. I am inside their local network. The firewall is substantial, but the keys are working. I am approaching the central ledger command interface. Execute, Rostova commanded, her voice ringing like a bell. Executing, Magister replied. Across the public feed for the entire quadrant, to see a new entry was logged on the Cathar Ascendancy's official ledger. It was written in their own flowing script, authenticated by their own unhackable keys, and processed by their own infallible system. The mandate was simple. It identified the siphoned life energy not as a tithe, but as an unauthorized loan. Citing dozens of Cathar precedents on predatory lending, it declared all outstanding loans immediately due. It calculated centuries of compound interest. And then came the final devastating command: repay all debts, return all assets, balance the ledger. Now. A debt can be paid in any coin. They were about to be paid in light. For a moment, nothing happened. The adjudicator's ship continued its slow, menacing approach. Then, on the main screen, a flicker. A weapon port on the Enforcer sparked, then went dark. Another followed. The ship's energy signature began to fluctuate wildly. Report, Magister. The command was accepted. The AI stated its light returning to its normal calm pulse. The network is complying. It is attempting to repay an incalculable debt instantaneously. It is rerouting all stored energy from the central repositories and all currently siphoned energy back to its points of origin. On the tactical map, 1,000 new lines of light appeared. Every Cathar ship, every elite residence, every piece of their parasitic infrastructure was now a fountain, gushing stolen life energy back through the network. The system was trying to balance an unbalanceable book, and it was tearing itself apart in the process. The adjudicator's ship convulsed. Its lights flickered and died. Its barriers collapsed. It was now just a dead piece of metal in the void, its power supply frantically trying to empty itself to repay a debt to a glimmer-weft weaver who had died a century ago. The effect is cascading, Magister reported. Cathar home worlds are experiencing total power grid failures as the repositories overload in their attempt to discharge. The gratitude callers are deactivating their connection to the network severed. The siphon is broken. Rostova watched, her breath held. This was it. The system-scale mirror maneuver. Not an act of war, but an act of pure mathematical restitution. They hadn't fired a shot. They had simply sent a bill for everything. The cost of this victory was etched into the auditor itself. Diverting that much processing power had caused a cascade failure in Magister's tertiary memory cores. The AI had sacrificed a part of itself, a library of cultural and historical data it had curated for centuries, to make the maneuver possible. It was a wound that would never fully heal. The ship felt quieter, emptier. The second cost was back home. The sanctions had caused damage that couldn't be undone by this victory. Supply chains were broken, alliances strained. The rebuilding would be long and hard. Humanity had proven its point, but the proof had a price. The win was earned in every sense of the word. In the aftermath, the Cathar ascendancy did not just fall, it dissolved. An empire built on a lie could not survive the truth. A civilization powered by theft could not function when its credit was revoked. The adjudicator was captured, his ship a lifeless tomb. The prelates and high functionaries were left powerless, their robes dark, their longevity enhancements failing. They were just ordinary mortals facing a galaxy of creditors. The quorum galvanized into action moved swiftly. The old laws were struck down. A new precedent was forged, one that Rostova and Jian helped draft. It was broadcast on every public channel, a new foundation for galactic law. On the bridge of the TDC auditor, the main screen showed the public ledger entry blinking with finality. Precedent. 1 Alpha, the Rostova Doctrine. Any contract, treaty, or tithe exacted through biological or energetic siphoning is hereby declared an act of predation and is null and void. All privileges of sovereignty are forfeited by any species engaging in such practices. The ledger is now the law. The command deck was quiet. The crew was exhausted but resolute. The mirror arrays on the ship's hull, which had been used to focus the tight beam transmission to the Cathar ship, were slowly cooling, ticking softly in the silence. Rostova stood before the screen looking at the new law that bore her name. They had won. They had not committed genocide. They had not become monsters to fight monsters. They had simply demanded that the books be balanced. Justice was not about revenge. It was about the cold, clean, and beautiful integrity of the final count, where every debt is paid and every credit is honored. The universe did not run on mercy or cruelty. It ran on mathematics. And today they were the auditors of that final absolute sum. They sent us a bill for our son. We sent them a receipt for their souls.